Sully was skinned, Nemo is dead, Woody is an evil robot. These Pixar movie theories will ruin your childhood, and each one coming up is scarier than the last. The Toy Story franchise is the one that started it all for Pixar. It may seem like a harmless story about the connection between children and toys, but the relationship between young Andy and his posable friends may conceal a dark secret. Toys in Toy Story generally get a rough ride at the hands of humans, with their situation being comparable to slavery in many ways. They're forced to suppress their personalities, living a life in secret and constant service of their masters, and are even branded.
What a stupid little child!
This all seems ridiculous until you consider the possibility that the toys may actually be alive, either as highly sophisticated AI machines or otherwise. The theory even goes so far as to suggest that all seemingly inanimate objects that possess a hint of personality are alive in the Pixar universe. Here's where Cars comes in. It's speculated that the human-free world of talking cars is a future where the sentient machines of Toy Story's era have risen up and taken over. This also ties into the events of WALL-E, where humans have been evacuated from the Earth. What if the story of too much trash forcing humans off Earth and WALL-E was simply a cover-up, hiding the fact that evil living objects had forced humans out? Perhaps Toy Story 5 will even feature Woody channeling his inner Chucky.
It's time to play.
Well, no sleep for me tonight. Now, the unique Scottish set fantasy flick Brave may seem to stand alone in the Pixar catalog, but it contains some undeniable links to the adventures of Mike Wazowski and friends. Some believe Brave's magical wizened old witch is none other than Sully's pint-sized pal Boo.
Huh?
Why? The answer lies in those doors in Monsters, Inc. that take the monsters to different places and what it is they actually do. Supposedly, they can take you all over the human world, but what if these portals could take you across time as well as space? According to supporters of this theory, Boo devoted her life after Monsters, Inc. to searching for Sully, and in doing so ended up going back in time to the world of Brave. It's clear that Brave's witch has harnessed the eternal magic of the Will-O-Wisps. Indeed, the witch disappears without a trace after entering a door in her hut, suggesting a similar capability to the doors in Monsters, Inc. It's possible Boo discovered this power in her own time and harnessed it to create magic doors to reach Sully, but was seemingly unsuccessful and remained in the bonny Scotland of old. To add credence to the theory, the witch's hut even has a carving of Sully on display, possibly a reminder of her old friend. But here's the childhood ruining part. Boo is elderly now, and after all those years of trying, it seems like she'll never see her kitty again. Carrying on with the Monsters, Inc. theories, the aforementioned theory that doors are able to travel in time as well as space could explain the monsters' extreme fear of children. Initially, the monsters fear humans spread plague like rats, but don't dismiss this fear of humans as irrational just yet. If the doors are able to travel across time, it's entirely possible that at some point one or several monsters traveled back to the 14th century on a scare mission. If they visited Europe in, say, 1348, they could have entered into the bedroom of a highly infectious victim of the Black Death, possibly even a room stacked with plague-ridden bodies. If the infection spread to them, even hairy beasts would be right to be petrified. After all, experiencing huge blood-filled boils, intense pain, fever, diarrhea, and death isn't anyone's idea of fun. The germaphobes aren't going to get much relief in the next theory either. In 2015's Inside Out, we take it for granted that the beings inside Riley's head, as well as her imaginary friend Bing Bong, are either representations of her emotions or products of her imagination. But what if they existed in a much more literal way? Real-world research in recent years has hinted that bacteria present in our bodies and brains has the ability to influence our emotions and the functions of our brain. So, what if the creatures in Riley's head are actually some kind of mind-controlling bacteria? To take it one step further, looking at their appearance, especially Bing Bong, Could these creatures be precursors to the monsters of Monsters, Inc.? The theory suggests that these bacteria evolved over thousands of years after Inside Out, leaving their human hosts, growing in size, establishing their own civilizations, and becoming less humanoid in form, before finally taking on the forms we see in Mike, Sully, and their colleagues. We all know that Finding Nemo is one of the more gut-wrenching Pixar movies. Ultimately, there is a happy ending, but what if the whole adventure was a lie?
What the hell are you talking about?
Marlin clings on to Nemo because he's the last remaining member of his family after losing the rest in a barracuda attack. But some theorists believe Nemo also perished, and we're witnessing Marlin going through the 5 stages of grief. First, there's denial. Marlin convinces himself that Nemo survived the barracuda attack. Then anger. Marlin's constant overprotection and arguing with his imaginary son. And bargaining, Marlin's desire to help Dory in exchange for helping him search for his son. Followed by despair, Marlin's feverish realization that his son is missing, with the waning hope that he may find him, and finally acceptance, when Marlin finds Nemo and finally lets him swim off to school at the end of the movie. Which is, of course, his way of letting go of the illusion that Nemo is still alive. As for the scenes in the fish tank and others where Marlin isn't around, Marlin could easily have imagined these scenarios to keep Nemo alive in his mind. To cap it all off, there's the meaning of the name Nemo itself. You may assume he's named after Captain Nemo, but what's the English translation of this Latin word? Nobody. Marlin is trying to track down nobody. Mind blown. Toys are very important to Andy, the child at the core of the first 2 Toy Story movies. According to one theory, however, they're more than just playthings. Fans notice the total absence of the boy's father, as well as the fact that there are no pictures of him around the house. This led them to conclude that Andy's dad didn't die, he abandoned his family. Not only that, but Tom Hanks' heroic cowboy fills the void, taking on the role of a weird plastic father figure. Through Andy's vivid imagination, Woody comes to life possessing the traits of loyalty and selflessness that Andy's absent father lacked. Andy talks about Woody in glowing terms, idolizing him as someone who's always there, filling a significant void in his young life. You could even interpret Andy giving up his toys in the 3rd installment as symbolic of him no longer needing that emotional crutch. The filmmakers state they only had so much budget for so many characters, so that didn't make the cut. But we know better, right? Someone else getting the cut is Sully. Voiced by John Goodman, the Beast was a labor of love for animators in terms of the amount of work that went into realizing every strand of his colorful fur. And it's that fur that forms the center of this disturbing theory. It goes back to one of the villains of Monsters, Inc., Randall Boggs. Randall tells Sully that humans have been known to strip monsters of their skin and use them as toilet seat covers. As a throwaway line, it's pretty funny, but flash forward a decade to the Toy Story spin-off short Partysaurus Rex, and you'll see a very disturbing sight in the bathroom. A toilet seat cover perfectly resembling Sully's fur. Turns out Randall wasn't kidding around after all. It seems Sully entered the wrong bedroom and gave his final scare. Maybe that's why Boo never found him. Toy Story 2 introduces us to Wheezy, who's about as far from threatening as you can get. We can't help feeling sorry for him, knowing he's been left on the shelf gathering dust for so long after his squeaker got broken through no fault of his own. But one twisted theory paints Wheezy as an embittered mastermind who manipulates Woody and sets the events of the movie in motion. Most people think Wheezy ended up out at the yard sale where Woody would later be swiped up by Big Al by accident. But this theory suggests that Wheezy orchestrated the whole thing, knowing that Woody, being the heroic toy that he is, would come to his roadside rescue and inevitably get taken away from Andy. With Woody out of the picture, Wheezy hoped that he'd receive the attention Woody had been hogging for so long. It makes sense that spending so much time in isolation would have turned Wheezy into a bitter, twisted, squeaky penguin. Admittedly, that last part kind of undermines the intimidation factor. Just when you thought Monsters, Inc. couldn't be dragged any further into the dark, eldritch depths, it's time for an even more disturbing theory. To the untrained eye, Boo looks like she's having great fun with her monstrous companions throughout the movie. But what if Monstropolis wasn't a real place at all, nor were its inhabitants? What if the story of Monsters, Inc. is merely a warped memory left in Boo's mind after her abduction? Look at things from the point of view of Boo's family. To them, Boo may have disappeared for days only to reappear talking about a giant hairy individual who appeared in her room at night, tried to make her scream, and then took her to unfamiliar places. Could it be that Sully was actually some overly hairy midnight creeper who went around abducting children? Maybe he even wore a blue and purple shirt. Whatever happened on this journey, it's possible that Boo developed Stockholm Syndrome and learned to love her kidnapper. Or perhaps her mind repressed the awful memories, turning the horrible people involved into lovable, colorful characters as a way of helping her cope with the trauma of the whole ordeal. Either way, it's one twisted theory, and I'll never be able to watch Monsters, Inc. in the same way again. So I've already talked about how toys are actually robotic AI preparing to satisfy their bloodlust and overthrow humanity. The problem with that is, though, where do they keep their mechanics? Some are stuffed with cotton, and Forky is a literal plastic spork. So I've come up with an alternate theory, and one that's even more messed up. I used to assume it was the children's love and attention that kept the toys alive, but no one ever loved Stinky Pete, and he's alive. Plus, at the end of Toy Story 4, Woody goes off with Bo Peep and the other lost toys far away from any children. So we can safely put the kibosh on that idea too. Earlier, I talked about how Andy's dad abandoned the family, but back in 2017, toy expert Mike Mozart had a darker answer. He was apparently friends with Joe Ranft, a Pixar head, and claimed that Ranft told him the real story. Andy's dad didn't abandon him. He passed away and left Andy the toys from his own childhood, including Woody, which explains why Andy, a 90s kid, plays with a 50s toy. However, Ranft sadly passed away in 2005 and can't corroborate the story. What's more, Mozart's account has been dismissed by Andrew Stanton, a writer on every Toy Story film. But what does he know? Let's say the story's true and the toys were left by Andy's dead dad. We all know Woody became Andy's father figure, but I'm going one step further. Woody actually is Andy's dad. Let me explain. Remember in Soul, when Joe falls to Earth and lands in the body of a cat? Well, this can't be the first time a soul's ended up in the wrong body. So would it be such a stretch for one to end up in the body of a toy? What if Andy's father's soul was transported into the Woody doll and trapped there forever in its plastic confines? Once there, he forgot about his former life aside from the love for his son and really believed he was Woody. In fact, maybe all the toys harbor souls of the dead. Think about it. Toys possess innate knowledge of the human world and can read and write without any kind of schooling. Is that because what's left of their human memories imprinted the knowledge on their toy minds? In Coco, we see how forgotten souls evaporate into thin air. I'm saying that instead of being lost, they're transferred into playthings instead, forced to dedicate their existence to making children happy. Which sure is kinda nice, but also seems a lot like slavery. Now let's fast forward to the end of WALL-E, where the near immobile and tech-dependent humans return to Earth. It seems like a happy ending, but in reality, this is far from the truth. In this universe, humans find themselves lost on their homeland, so continue to rely on robots to do everything for them. Thousands of years pass, and as they do, their over-reliance on machines makes their human bodies grow weaker and less stable, before eventually evolving into formless maggot-like creatures. And if you don't buy it, in early drafts of WALL-E, the main character was supposed to come across gelatinous blob creatures that only spoke gibberish, and it would turn out they were the descendants of humans. It was only later that this was swapped out for the obese humans we see in the finished version. To survive the harsh world outside, these worm creatures had mecha exoskeletons built for themselves like the Daleks in Doctor Who, where they hid their true forms. And here's the gear shift. This means that the cars in Cars aren't cars at all. Or as hypothesized earlier, AI robots. No, they're actually the slithery descendants of the humans in WALL-E, just in car exoskeletons. Now, the world building in Cars gets really complicated. The idea is the cars are just reincarnations of humans, which is why there's even a pope that exists in the Cars universe. So, in the aftermath of the apocalypse, the robot-encased blobs rebuilt civilization to be a carbon copy of what came before. And that's why all their cities resemble our modern-day ones. To maintain a functional society, the Cars rewrote history, convincing the masses over time that they'd always lived inside vehicles and continued to rely on the same human culture, just like the UK still having royalty and the Catholic Church still having a pope. Phew. It's not just the Cars who are fighting to exist, though. In Finding Nemo, Bruce the shark laments,
Never knew my father! Come here!
once born, great whites are on their own, so absent fathers are par for the course. But some people think a certain superhero may have played a nefarious part in Bruce's dad's disappearance. In this specific scene where Bob, Mr. Incredible, is writing down a note at his desk, you can see in the top left corner a picture of him killing a white shark, which is the exact same species as Bruce. Now, great whites are actually supposed to live up until 45 years old, which is the exact same age as Bruce in Finding Nemo, which would make him born in 1958. And obviously, his father was in the ocean with him, so going back to the scene of Bob at his desk, if you look at that photo, it's actually in black and white, which means that would have likely taken place in the 1950s before color photos were widely accessible to the public in the 60s. Then, in Finding Nemo, a kid was actually reading a comic book of The Incredibles, meaning it takes place in the exact same universe or timeline. So it's likely that Mr. Incredible killed Bruce's father. I know what you're thinking. Big whoop. So Mr. Incredible killed a shark. But here's where the theory gets more unsettling. Finding Nemo and its sequel Finding Dory present an underwater world inhabited by intelligent sea life with human-like sentience. In Luca, we're shown that not only do sea creatures exist, but they can also shapeshift into humans. If pop culture has taught me anything, it's that undersea beasties are always trying to overthrow us landlubbers. This goes way back to ancient times. Just take a look at the Fomorians, sea demons from Irish mythology who slithered from the depths to rule over Tir na Nog. Centuries later, horror writer H.P. Lovecraft told of how the great god Cthulhu slumbered in an underwater kingdom surrounded by rubbery fish minions. And did you not watch The Deep Sea King and One Punch Man? You see, the fish in Finding Nemo and sea monsters from Luca are all minions of some monstrous sea entity. It's no surprise the sea monsters can disguise themselves as humans when they're out of water. It's so they can effectively spy on real humans, aka the enemy. And the shark's famous mantra, "Fish are friends, not food," well, that's actually a directive instilled by this mysterious entity to ensure they ignore their base instincts and remain loyal to the aquatic cause. No doubt that these creatures climbed out of the sea in a fishy insurrection, and Mr. Incredible battled against them, ultimately coming out victorious. For now, Bruce's father was probably just one of the casualties of war. Why did Mr. Incredible choose to have a photo with him in particular? Maybe he held an important position in the sea creature army. Either way, if that's the price I have to pay for my air-breathing freedom, so be it. Alright, so I've already talked about how the monsters in Monsters, Inc. might have evolved from bacteria, but truth be told, Pixar already revealed the real history of the Monsters, Inc. world in the DVD extras. Here it explains that millennia ago there were the Mans and the Mons. The Mons wanted to live side by side with the Mans in harmony, yet the Mans, thinking the Mons too hairy and smelly, drove them away, forcing them to a mysterious island. Along the tree's branches hung strange fruits. Different animals of the land ate different fruits, so the Mons plucked them from the branches and bit into the juicy flesh. As they ate, the fruit gave them characteristics of the animals that had eaten them. The Mons became hairier, their teeth grew longer, horns sprouted from their bodies and claws from their hands. They looked frightful. Noticing their scary appearances, the Mons traveled back to the land of the Mans and, in revenge for being spurned, jumped out roaring, giving them a good scare. Over time, the Mons became monsters, and the Mans became man, which does kinda discredit the whole bacteria theory, but it also means we have a brand new and much more heartbreaking one, that the Mons are actually closely related to early humans, the Mans. Perhaps their Neanderthals are just another variety of early Homo sapiens that had more hair and longer canines. In eating the strange fruit, the Mons' appearances may have changed, but they're still essentially human, which makes the fact that Mans forced their odd-looking relations to exist in separate society even more sad. Over time, these two societies became so separate that the whole concept of a monster became myth. You know what else is a myth? Inside Out's wholesome message. Everyone bangs on about how much the movie warms the cockles, but I'm having none of it. Something's off with Riley's parents, especially her mom. According to Inside Out, the essential guide, her name's Jill Anderson. But when Riley steals her mom's credit card, the name says K. Ann Anderson. What? Why? Simple. Either she stole the card or she's fabricated a new identity. Either way, she's a cold, hard criminal. But hey, it explains why the family had to move, probably because the law was getting a whiff of their dodgy deals. When we look into the mom's memories, we see how she lived an adventurous life with a hot Brazilian pilot. Well, it was probably funded by all the money she stole. Also, we never see that pilot again. What did she do with him? Perhaps her atrocities are more vicious than we first imagined, and it took a toll on both parents. I mean, the emotion leading the control panel in Mom's head is sadness, while Dad's is anger. They may pretend to be normal and happy for the sake of their child, but inside, they're rupturing. And they're not the only ones facing accusations. For those of you living under a rock, Donald Trump was elected as president of the U.S. Now, some have noticed that the U.S.'s slide to the right has affected the content produced by Pixar Studios. Take, for instance, the Disney Plus series Win or Lose, about a team of underdog softball players. Originally, the character Kai was written to be revealed as trans, but this storyline was cut. This was criticized by plenty of people, including Pixar's own staff and the character's trans voice actor Chanel Stewart. Not that it made any difference. And then there's the upcoming film Hoppers, about scientists who find a way to teleport their minds into the bodies of robotic beavers. Sure. Anyway, one Pixar artist told The Hollywood Reporter that staff were told to downplay environmental themes in a film that was supposed to be all about the environment. Great. All of this has sparked theories that Disney is cowing down to President Trump's anti-diversity schemes and climate crisis denial. After all, the president only gives interviews to news outlets sympathetic to him. So what if he's trying to control the media in a bigger way? Which company holds more sway in shaping young minds than Disney and Pixar? Seems like Trump has these companies in the palm of his hand. Speaking of tiny things, at the end of A Bug's Life, the grasshoppers are defeated, Flick and Princess Anna butter the biscuit, and the circus bugs are good. Happy endings all round, right?
Yes!
Wrong. Heimlich, the obese caterpillar, is destined for a fate I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. If you remember, he sort of metamorphoses into a butterfly at the end, as in, he's pretty much the same apart from some measly little vestigial wings. Just a gag, I hear you cry. How naive. See, caterpillars are often the target of wasp parasitoids. They lay their eggs inside the caterpillar's body, and after hatching, the larvae grow inside them, eating the caterpillar's insides but avoiding its vital organs. This keeps the caterpillar alive so the larva can continue to feed, but the growing parasite make the host's body swell up grotesquely until they look just like Heimlich. Then when the caterpillar pupates, the parasitoids prevent it from turning into a butterfly, just like Heimlich, until in the end, they burst fully grown out of its body, killing it in the process. For poor Heimlich, this is the terrible fate that awaits him. Although he isn't the only one getting devoured by parasites. On March 20th, 2019, Disney completed its acquisition of 21st Century Fox for $71.3 billion. So properties like The Simpsons, X-Men, and Alien are now all owned by the Disney company, meaning they could easily become part of the same shared universe as the Pixar movies. This brings me to Buzz Lightyear. As we saw in 2022's Lightyear, Buzz's role as a space ranger sends him across the universe. It's now perfectly feasible that he could receive a distress call from the Alien franchise's moon, Archeron. While exploring, Buzz and his squad discover strange eggs that open up like mouths, and boom! A facehugger leaps out from one of them, smashes through Buzz's visor, and wraps around his face. Later, as everyone's favorite space ranger lies in a medbay, the facehugger finally releases its grip. Buzz sweats, confused and disoriented. He whispers, "To infinity and..." But before he can finish, a chest burster erupts from his ribcage. Oh, being a Toy Story spin-off, it'd probably be one of those little green aliens. Look, Disney, I just wrote you a screenplay.
Money, please.
While I wait on that check, why don't I tell you the sordid truth about Up? Everyone remembers that one moment when the doctor tells Carl and Ellie they can't have kids. It's heartbreaking. But some fans believe there's an even darker layer here. If the movie is set in 2009 when it was released, that means Carl Fredricksen was born in the early 1930s, and he met Ellie, his future wife, in an abandoned house that looks much older. Eventually, they'd turn this house into their home. Only before 1940, about 87% of homes in the US had lead-based paint. Yeesh. The Fredricksens fixed the place up themselves unknowingly, sanding, scraping, and breathing in toxic lead dust, and long-term exposure can cause all sorts of health problems, including infertility. It gets worse though. Lead particles are stored in vital organs, teeth, and even bones, which can be debilitating and, yes, prove fatal. So was the house the couple loved so much ultimately responsible for Ellie's demise? I'm going to say yes. And some say Ellie wasn't the only one. Up is pretty fantastical, right? I mean, a house being carried by balloons, talking dogs, Charles Muntz, an explorer about 20 years older than Carl, somehow looking the same age? Something's not quite right. That's because at the start of the film, Carl passes away. I'm going to say it's right about here. Perhaps the heartbreak of losing Ellie was just too much, or lead poisoning took his life too. Either way, the guy's a goner, and the rest of the movie is his journey to the afterlife. When the two care workers come to collect him, all they really find is his body. Carl's spirit then floats off, something he interprets as his house floating away. Paradise Falls, the place he idolized so much in his youth, becomes heaven. Russell is really his guardian angel who takes the form of a child like the one the Fredricksens could never have. Plus, notice how Russell's trying to earn his Wilderness Explorer badge? In reality, the angel is trying to earn his wings. Throughout his journey, Carl faces trials and tribulations that test his moral compass and see if he's really fit for heaven. Muntz is actually a fallen angel taking the form of Carl's childhood hero. He tries to persuade Carl to pursue selfish desires in order to drag him to the underworld with his hellhounds, who take the form of normal dogs. If that still doesn't convince you, in 16th century Europe, people believed that mythical birds, fittingly called birds of paradise, populated either some kind of earthly paradise or heaven. And where do Carl and Russell bump into Kevin, the bird of paradise? Yep, Paradise Falls, aka heaven. Damn. Moving on, Monsters, Inc. shows that every child on the planet has a respective monster who scares them. So it figures that Toy Story's Andy has his own monster too. The only question is, which monster is it? Thankfully, Jonathan Sim from Geeks has saved me a job and started with Andy's door. As you can see, it's white with 5 rectangular panels, which matches this door seen in Monsters University. Interesting. But that doesn't tell us which monster goes through it. Let's take a closer look. You've probably noticed Andy's blue cloud wallpaper. Now, which monster is shown practicing his camouflage ability against this particular wallpaper? Randall. He was Andy's monster. That's one of the worst guys to get. Anyone with Randall in their name is pure evil. When I want to take my mind off the Randalls of the world, I watch the bloopers at the end of A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, and Monsters, Inc. The characters slip up their lines, play pranks on each other, and get up to silly shenanigans. But don't you think it's weird that they're all clearly aware they're acting in films? Almost like they're not fictional characters at all and more like living things. This is the Pixar metaverse theory, and it goes like this. As I said, the Pixar theory characters are fully aware they're acting in a film. But what's more, they are representations of things, not the things themselves. During a blooper of A Bug's Life, Slim the stick insect swallows a bug.
Oh, wait, stop. I think I swallowed a bug.
But he's a bug, right? Why is no one perturbed by this blatant cannibalism? It's because they're not bugs. They just look like them. To make their films, Pixar does far more than hire a bunch of animators. They create life. Somehow Pixar has obtained the technology to create living organisms in whatever form they like. Need a cowboy toy? You got Woody. Need a hottie with flowing locks? You got Sully. So Pixar is God? You bet. They then take these creatures and hire them to act in their films for our entertainment. But if they're all acting, then why do all the characters refer to themselves by their characters' names?
What? What's so funny? Woody! Huh? Darn it, Woody!
Well, the best way to get a performance out of someone is for them to believe they're the character. When Pixar creates their actors, they imbue them with the character's personality, like a form of brainwashing. And it gets worse. There's a gag at the end of Toy Story 2.
Well, then, I don't understand. What is it then?
Makes sense. Bugs are tiny, but take a look at this blooper from A Bug's Life. How can Woody be the same size as the bugs in A Bug's Life when we've clearly just seen how the toys dwarf the bugs in Toy Story 2? Well, as Pixar can bring characters to life, they can duplicate them too. Just take a look at all those buzzes. They can be duplicated in any size, whether it's a giant Rex or a tiny Woody. Now ponder the ramifications of this for a moment. Imagine you could be replicated at a moment's notice and anyone could take your job. You're utterly expendable. If you're Woody, your sole purpose is to play Woody, to the point where you actually believe you're Woody. If that's taken from you, what else is there? At best, you'll spiral into a maddening depression. At worst, well, what happened to the tiny Woody working behind the scenes of A Bug's Life? It's not like he could act in a Toy Story film. He's too small. And considering we never see him again, well, it's not looking great. It's not just Pixar characters who exist at the whim of studio executives either. Take a look at the Academy Awards where we see characters from other animation studios, Jimmy Neutron, Happy Feet, my beloved Shrek. The metaverse includes all animated media of all time. Essentially, for those who've seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's a world where animated characters or toons coexist with humans in Hollywood. Here, they're treated as second-class citizens unable to gain work outside of the entertainment industry for which they were created. And when they've outgrown their use, if the movie's anything to go by, they're dunked into a pool of acidic dip. Yikes! The Incredibles straight up deny they're even toons.
Hey, we're still waiting for the check, by the way. Oh, come on. It's a cartoon. It's a cartoon.
This whole movie is a cartoon, you know?
Do I look like a cartoon to you?
That's how much stigma comes from being created by an animated studio. To be a toon is to live a miserable semi-existence. In other words,
Dear Lord, what a sad little life, Jane.
Sorry for ruining your childhood. If you somehow avoided being traumatized by these alternative takes, do you know of even more disturbing Pixar theories? Let me know in the comment section below, and you may be featured in a future video. Thanks for watching.